What if everything we thought we knew about ancient Egypt was wrong? What if the Great Sphinx, that iconic guardian of the Giza Plateau, has been silently watching over the desert for thousands of years longer than we ever imagined? What if it predates not just the pyramids, but the entire civilization we credit with building it? Tonight, we're diving into one of archaeology's most explosive controversies, a debate that's been raging in whispers and academic papers for decades, but is now breaking into the mainstream with evidence so compelling that it's forcing us to reconsider the very foundations of human history. Because what we're about to explore isn't just about dating an ancient monument, it's about rewriting the story of civilization itself. Welcome back to the channel. I'm your host, and if you're new here, you've just stumbled into a place where we don't just accept what we're told, we dig deeper. We ask the uncomfortable questions. And tonight's question is one that could shake the archaeological establishment to its core. But before we begin, I need to tell you something. This isn't going to be your typical history lesson. What we're about to uncover challenges decades of accepted scholarship, threatens established timelines, and opens doors to possibilities that most academics won't even acknowledge exist. The evidence we'll examine comes from multiple fields: geology, astronomy, archaeology, and even climate science, all pointing toward the same startling conclusion. And here's what makes this even more fascinating. The implications go far beyond just one monument. If the Sphinx is truly older than we thought, it means there was a sophisticated civilization capable of massive construction projects thousands of years before the first pharaoh ever sat on a throne. It means our entire understanding of human development, of when and how complex societies emerged, might be fundamentally flawed. So settle in, because over the next hour, we're going to examine evidence that most people have never heard of. We'll explore geological anomalies that don't match the official timeline. We'll look at astronomical alignments that suggest a much older origin. We'll investigate weathering patterns that tell a story completely different from what you learned in school. And we'll hear from researchers who've staked their careers on proving that human civilization is far older and far more sophisticated than mainstream archaeology is willing to admit. But I have to warn you, once you see this evidence, once you understand what it really means, you can't unsee it. The comfortable narrative of human history, the one where everything progresses neatly from simple to complex, from primitive to advanced, starts to crumble. And in its place emerges something far more mysterious, far more ancient, and far more profound. The story begins not with pharaohs or pyramids, but with water. Lots of it, cascading down from the sky in torrents that haven't been seen in the Sahara for over 7,000 years. Because to understand why the Sphinx might be older than we think, we first need to understand what Egypt looked like when it was built. And spoiler alert, it looked nothing like the desert wasteland we see today. Picture this. Instead of endless sand dunes and scorching heat, imagine a landscape of rolling green hills, flowing rivers, and abundant rainfall. Imagine forests where today there is only rock and sand. Imagine a climate so different from modern Egypt that it might as well have been another planet entirely. This isn't fantasy. This is what northeastern Africa actually looked like during what geologists call the African humid period, roughly 9,000 to 6,000 years ago. During this time, the Sahara wasn't a desert at all. It was a savanna teeming with life, crossed by rivers, dotted with lakes. The monsoon rains that today barely reach the southern edges of Egypt once swept far into what is now barren desert. Archaeological evidence shows that people lived throughout this region, hunting, fishing, and creating some of the world's earliest rock art. But then, around 4,500 years ago, the climate shifted. The rains stopped coming. The rivers dried up. The green landscape gradually transformed into the desert we know today. Now, here's where things get interesting. The traditional dating of the Sphinx places its construction around 2500 BCE, during the reign of Pharaoh Khafre. This puts it squarely in the middle of the dynastic period, when Egypt had already been a desert for over 1,000 years. The climate had long since shifted. The rains had stopped. The landscape looked essentially the same as it does today. But what if that dating is wrong? What if the Sphinx was actually carved thousands of years earlier, when the climate was completely different, when regular, heavy rainfall still pounded the Giza Plateau? Because if that's true, it would explain something that has puzzled researchers for over a century, something that doesn't fit the official timeline at all. You see, when you look closely at the Sphinx, really examine its surface and the walls of the enclosure that surrounds it, you notice something strange. The rock shows clear signs of water erosion. Not the kind of gentle weathering you'd expect from occasional desert storms or the rare flash flood. We're talking about deep, vertical channels carved into the limestone, smooth, rounded surfaces that could only have been created by substantial, sustained rainfall over long periods of time. This is where our story takes a turn that makes a lot of people very uncomfortable. In the 1990s, a Boston University geologist named Robert Schoch made an observation that would launch 1,000 academic battles. Schoch wasn't looking to revolutionize archaeology. He wasn't trying to prove any particular theory about ancient civilizations. He was simply applying his expertise in geology to examine the weathering patterns on the Sphinx and its enclosure. What he found challenged everything. The erosion patterns on the Sphinx, Schoch concluded, were consistent with thousands of years of rainfall weathering. The vertical channels, the rounded profiles, the deep fissures, all of it pointed to water, not wind and sand, as the primary erosive force. And not just any water, but the kind of heavy, sustained precipitation that hadn't occurred in that region for thousands of years before the traditional dating of the monument. When Schoch first presented his findings, the archaeological establishment reacted with what can only be described as hostility. Here was a geologist, an outsider, suggesting that one of Egypt's most iconic monuments might be thousands of years older than accepted scholarship claimed. The implications were staggering. If the Sphinx really was that old, it meant that sophisticated stone carving techniques existed in Egypt long before the rise of dynastic civilization. It meant that the entire timeline of human development in the region needed to be reconsidered. But Schoch wasn't alone in his observations. Other researchers began taking a closer look at the evidence, and they found that the geological anomalies extended far beyond just weathering patterns. The very bedrock of the Giza Plateau told a story that didn't match the official narrative. The limestone from which the Sphinx was carved comes from different geological layers, each with its own characteristics and age. When researchers examined these layers, they found something unexpected. The head of the Sphinx, which shows much less weathering than the body, appears to have been recarved from an earlier version. The proportions are wrong. The head is too small for the body, suggesting it was modified from something larger. Chemical analysis of the stone showed different weathering patterns between the head and the body, consistent with the head being worked on much more recently than the rest of the monuments. This led to a fascinating possibility. What if the Sphinx we see today is actually a renovation of a much older monument? What if ancient Egyptian workers during the dynastic period found an already ancient, weathered statue and recarved the head to match their own artistic traditions? It would explain the disproportionate head, the different weathering patterns, and the overall geological evidence for a much older origin. But the geological evidence is just the beginning. As researchers dug deeper, literally and figuratively, they found anomalies that suggested the Sphinx was part of a much larger, much older complex than anyone had imagined. Ground-penetrating radar surveys of the area around the Sphinx have revealed a network of chambers, tunnels, and voids beneath the monument and its enclosure. Some of these appear to be natural cavities, but others show signs of deliberate construction. There are perfectly rectangular chambers carved into the bedrock, connected by passages that follow geometric patterns inconsistent with natural formation. More intriguingly, some of these underground features align with astronomical phenomena, in ways that suggest they were designed with celestial observations in mind. This brings us to another piece of evidence that challenges the traditional dating: the astronomical alignment of the Sphinx itself. The Sphinx faces due east, toward the rising sun, but it's not just pointing towards sunrise in general, it's aligned with a very specific astronomical phenomenon. During the spring equinox, when day and night are equal, the sun rises directly in front of the Sphinx. But here's the fascinating part. Due to a phenomenon called precession, the constellation that appears behind the sun during the equinox changes over time, following a cycle that takes roughly 26,000 years to complete. During the traditional dating of the Sphinx, around 2500 BCE, the constellation Leo the Lion would have been visible behind the sun during the spring equinox. Some researchers have pointed to this as evidence supporting the conventional dating. After all, what better time to carve a lion-bodied monument than when Leo dominated the equinox sky? But when you run the astronomical calculations backward, something interesting emerges. If you go back to around 10,500 BCE, you find that Leo was rising with the sun during the spring equinox, at a time when it would have been perfectly positioned relative to the Sphinx's gaze. This period, over 12,000 years ago, coincides almost exactly with the end of the last ice age and the beginning of the African humid period, when the climate would have been perfect for the kind of sustained construction project the Sphinx represents. This astronomical evidence doesn't prove the older dating, but it certainly supports it. And when combined with the geological and archaeological anomalies, it creates a compelling case that the Sphinx might be far older than mainstream archaeology is willing to acknowledge. But perhaps the most intriguing evidence comes from an unexpected source: ancient Egyptian texts themselves. While most hieroglyphic inscriptions support the traditional dating, there are scattered references throughout Egyptian literature to monuments of incredible age, predating the pharaohs by thousands of years. The inventory stela, discovered in the 19th century, explicitly states that the Sphinx already existed when Khufu built the Great Pyramid, and that he merely restored it. Now, most Egyptologists dismiss the inventory stela as a later forgery, created during the Sate period to boost the prestige of local temples. But what if they're wrong? What if this inscription preserves a genuine memory of the Sphinx's true age? As we piece together all this evidence, geological, astronomical, archaeological, and textual, a picture begins to emerge of a monument far older and far more mysterious than we've been led to believe. But accepting this picture means accepting something that challenges our most fundamental assumptions about human history. It means accepting that sophisticated civilizations capable of massive engineering projects existed thousands of years before we thought they did. It means acknowledging that our understanding of how human society developed might be incomplete or even fundamentally flawed. And it opens the door to questions that make a lot of people very uncomfortable. Who were these early builders? What happened to them? Why don't we have more evidence of their existence? And perhaps most unsettling of all, what else about our past have we gotten wrong? These questions become even more pressing when you realize that the Sphinx isn't the only ancient monument showing signs of being far older than traditionally believed. Across the globe, from the megalithic temples of Malta to the mysterious structures at Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, archaeologists are finding evidence of sophisticated construction techniques dating back to periods when humans were supposedly still hunter-gatherers living in simple societies. But let's stay focused on Egypt for now, because the evidence there is mounting in ways that are becoming impossible to ignore. One of the most compelling pieces of this puzzle comes from studying the construction techniques used on the Sphinx itself. When you examine the monument closely, you notice something that doesn't quite fit the narrative of dynastic Egyptian craftsmanship. The carving style, the tool marks, even the overall approach to shaping the stone shows characteristics that are distinctly different from other monuments that we know were built during the Fourth Dynasty. Dr. Robert Temple, a scholar who spent decades studying ancient construction techniques, has documented these differences in remarkable detail. The Sphinx shows evidence of being carved using techniques that appear to predate the sophisticated bronze tools available to 4th dynasty craftsmen. Instead, the tool marks suggest the use of harder stone implements, pounding and grinding techniques that were common in much earlier periods. More fascinating still, the Sphinx shows evidence of being carved from the top down, rather than the more typical ancient Egyptian practice of carving from multiple directions simultaneously. This top-down approach is consistent with much older construction methods, techniques that were largely abandoned by the time of the pharaohs in favor of more efficient approaches. But here's where things get really interesting. In 1993, researchers conducting seismic surveys around the Sphinx discovered something that shouldn't exist according to the traditional timeline. The surveys revealed a large rectangular chamber directly beneath the monument's pores, approximately 9 meters below the surface. This chamber, which appears to be artificial rather than natural, shows no signs of having been accessed during the dynastic period. Even more intriguing, additional chambers were detected beneath the Sphinx's body and extending back toward the rear of the monument. These underground spaces follow a pattern that suggests deliberate planning and construction, not the random cavities you'd expect from natural limestone formation. The Egyptian authorities, led by Dr. Zahi Hawass, have consistently refused to allow excavation of these chambers. Their official position is that such excavation would damage the monument and that the chambers are likely natural cavities of no archaeological significance. But this stance has only fueled more speculation about what might be hidden beneath one of the world's most famous monuments. Independent researchers have used increasingly sophisticated technology to map these underground spaces. Ground-penetrating radar, electromagnetic surveys, and seismic tomography have all confirmed the presence of artificial chambers beneath the Sphinx. Some of these surveys suggest the chambers may contain artifacts, or even written records, though without excavation, this remains speculation. The refusal to explore these chambers has created a situation where we have tantalizing evidence of hidden spaces beneath a monument whose age is already in dispute, but we're prevented from investigating further. It's a frustrating position for researchers who believe these chambers might hold the key to understanding the Sphinx's true origins. This brings us to another piece of evidence that's often overlooked in discussions about the Sphinx's age: the monument's relationship to the broader Giza complex. While most people think of the Sphinx as being built as part of Khafra's pyramid complex, a closer examination reveals that this relationship might not be as straightforward as it appears. The causeway that connects Khafra's pyramid to the Valley Temple makes an unusual bend to avoid the Sphinx. In most Egyptian pyramid complexes, the causeway runs in a straight line from the pyramid to the Valley Temple. The fact that Khafra's causeway deviates from this pattern suggests that the Sphinx was already there when the causeway was built, forcing the builders to work around an existing monument. This architectural evidence is subtle but significant. It suggests that rather than being built as part of Khafra's complex, the Sphinx was an existing feature that was incorporated into the later pharaoh's building program. This interpretation is consistent with the inventory stellar's claim that Khufu found the Sphinx already in place and merely restored it. Supporting this interpretation is the fact that the Sphinx temple, which sits directly in front of the monument, is built using massive megalithic blocks that are architecturally distinct from other 4th dynasty structures. These blocks, some weighing over 200 tons, are cut and fitted using techniques that are rarely seen in later Egyptian construction. The precision of the joints, the massive scale of individual stones, and the overall construction approach are more consistent with much earlier building traditions. The mystery deepens when you examine the water damage in the Sphinx temple itself. Like the Sphinx, the temple shows clear signs of water erosion on its interior walls. These erosion patterns are particularly pronounced on the western wall, which faces the direction from which the prevailing winds would have carried rain during the African humid period. The pattern and extent of this erosion is consistent with centuries of exposure to significant rainfall, not the occasional desert storms that have occurred in the region during historical times. Dr. Schoch has documented this erosion in detail, showing how it differs markedly from the sand abrasion that characterizes most weathering in the Giza area. The water erosion creates smooth, rounded profiles and deep vertical channels that are unmistakable signatures of rainfall weathering. Sand abrasion, by contrast, creates sharp angular features and horizontal scoring patterns. The implications of this evidence extend far beyond just the dating of a single monument. If the Sphinx really is thousands of years older than traditionally believed, it suggests that the region was inhabited by people capable of sophisticated stone carving long before the rise of dynastic Egypt. This pushes back the timeline of advanced civilization in the area by millennia. But who were these early builders? This is where the story becomes even more intriguing, because the answer might lie not in Egypt itself, but in the broader patterns of human migration and development following the end of the last ice age. Around 12,000 years ago, as the ice sheets that had covered much of the northern hemisphere began to retreat, sea levels rose dramatically. Coastal areas that had been home to human populations for thousands of years were suddenly underwater. Archaeological evidence suggests that these rising waters displaced millions of people, forcing them to migrate to higher ground and new territories. Some researchers propose that these climate refugees, carrying with them advanced knowledge and techniques developed over thousands of years in their flooded homelands, were responsible for the sudden appearance of sophisticated construction projects in various parts of the world. The timing fits perfectly with the proposed older dating of the Sphinx, and it would explain why similar advanced techniques appear simultaneously in widely separated locations around the globe. This theory, sometimes called the lost civilization hypothesis, suggests that the monuments we attribute to the earliest known civilizations might actually be the work of much older cultures whose homelands are now beneath the ocean. It's a controversial idea, but one that's gaining support as more evidence emerges of sophisticated construction techniques in extremely ancient contexts. The most famous example of this pattern is Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, where massive stone pillars arranged in complex patterns have been dated to over 11,000 years ago. The sophistication of the carving, the astronomical alignments, and the sheer scale of the construction project challenge everything we thought we knew about human capabilities in the immediate post-Ice Age period. Similar patterns are emerging at sites around the world. In Peru, the massive stone blocks at Sacsayhuaman show construction techniques that seem impossibly advanced for their supposed age. In Lebanon, the enormous foundation stones at Baalbek are so large that modern engineers struggle to understand how they could have been moved and positioned with ancient technology. All of these sites share certain characteristics. They use massive stone blocks fitted together with incredible precision. They show evidence of advanced planning and engineering, and they're all significantly older than the civilizations traditionally credited with building them. The Sphinx, with its geological evidence of great age, fits perfectly into this global pattern. But accepting this pattern means reconsidering some of our most basic assumptions about human history. It means acknowledging that the neat progression from simple to complex societies that we teach in schools might be an oversimplification. It suggests that human civilization might be far older, far more sophisticated, and far more mysterious than we've been willing to admit. The resistance to these ideas from mainstream archaeology is understandable. Careers have been built on the current timeline. Textbooks would need to be rewritten. University courses would require fundamental revision. The entire structure of archaeological academia has been organized around specific assumptions about when and how human civilization developed. But science is supposed to be self-correcting. When new evidence emerges that challenges existing theories, those theories should be revised or replaced. The question is whether the archaeological establishment is willing to embrace this principle when it comes to evidence that challenges some of their most fundamental assumptions. The debate over the Sphinx's age has become a perfect example of this tension. On one side, you have geological evidence, astronomical calculations, and construction analysis all pointing toward a much older origin. On the other side, You have an academic establishment that has invested decades in defending the traditional timeline and is reluctant to acknowledge evidence that contradicts it. This isn't just an academic debate with no real-world consequences. Understanding the true age of the Sphinx and similar monuments could revolutionize our understanding of human capability and achievement. It could help us understand how our ancestors dealt with dramatic climate change and social upheaval. It might even provide insights that could help us face similar challenges in our own time. More immediately, it could transform our approach to archaeology itself. If monuments like the Sphinx really are thousands of years older than we thought, it suggests that we've been looking for evidence of early advanced civilizations in the wrong places and the wrong time periods. It means there might be countless other sites of incredible antiquity that we've dismissed or overlooked because they don't fit our preconceived notions about human development. The evidence is mounting, but the questions remain. How do we reconcile geological evidence with archaeological orthodoxy? How do we balance respect for established scholarship with openness to revolutionary new ideas? And perhaps most importantly, how do we ensure that our understanding of the past continues to evolve as new evidence emerges? These aren't easy questions, and they don't have simple answers. But they're questions we need to keep asking, because the alternative, clinging to theories that might be fundamentally flawed, does a disservice to both our ancestors and ourselves. The Sphinx has been keeping its secrets for thousands of years. Maybe it's time we started listening to what it's trying to tell us. The deeper we dig into this mystery, the more we realize that the Sphinx isn't just challenging our timeline, it's challenging our entire understanding of what human civilization looked like in the deep past. And that brings us to one of the most fascinating aspects of this debate, the technology question. See, when we talk about ancient advanced civilizations, people immediately jump to images of flying saucers and laser beams. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about something potentially far more interesting. The possibility that our ancestors developed sophisticated techniques for working with stone, for astronomical observation, for large-scale construction projects, using tools and methods that we've simply lost or forgotten. Think about it this way. We live in an age where we can 3D print houses and build skyscrapers that scrape the clouds, but we struggle to understand how ancient people moved 200-ton blocks of stone with precision that rivals modern machinery. We have satellites that can map the entire globe, but we're still discovering hidden chambers beneath monuments that have been studied for over a century. This isn't about ancient aliens or lost super technology. This is about recognizing that human ingenuity and capability might be far older than we've assumed. And the evidence for this extends well beyond just the Sphinx. Dr. Christopher Dunn, a precision machinist who's spent decades studying ancient Egyptian stonework, has documented tooling marks on various monuments that suggest the use of techniques we don't fully understand. When he examined the granite boxes in the Serapeum of Saqqara, he found evidence of machining precision that would be impressive even by modern standards. The surfaces are flat to within thousandths of an inch. The corners are perfectly square. The tool marks suggest cutting methods that don't match any known ancient Egyptian techniques. Now, Dunn isn't claiming that the ancient Egyptians had modern machinery. What he's suggesting is that they developed methods for achieving precision that we haven't figured out yet. Methods that might have been common knowledge thousands of years ago, but were lost when civilizations collapsed or were abandoned. This pattern of lost knowledge isn't unique to Egypt. Throughout history, civilizations have developed sophisticated techniques that were later forgotten. The Romans perfected concrete that could set underwater and has lasted for over 2,000 years, but the exact formula was lost for centuries. Medieval cathedral builders developed engineering techniques that modern architects struggle to replicate. The Damascus steel of ancient bladesmiths created metal with properties that we're only now beginning to understand. If we can lose knowledge over centuries, what might have been lost over millennia? What techniques might have been common during the African humid period that disappeared when the climate changed and forced massive population migrations? This question becomes even more intriguing when we consider the global context. The proposed older dating of the Sphinx places its construction at roughly the same time as other mysterious monuments around the world. Göbekli Tepe, which we mentioned earlier, was built around 11,000 years ago and then deliberately buried around 8,000 years ago. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis suggests that a series of cosmic impacts around 12,900 years ago caused massive climate disruption and may have ended an earlier period of advanced human development. These aren't fringe theories anymore. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis has gained significant support from mainstream scientists. Evidence for these impacts has been found at dozens of sites across North America and Europe. The timing corresponds exactly with the beginning of the Younger Dryas period, a 1,000-year return to Ice Age conditions that occurred just as the world was warming up from the last glacial maximum. If this hypothesis is correct, it means that human civilization around 13,000 years ago was developing in ways we don't fully understand, only to be disrupted by a global catastrophe that reset much of human progress. The monuments that survived, like a potentially much older Sphinx, would be remnants of this earlier period of development. But here's where the story gets even more interesting. Recent discoveries are suggesting that the disruption wasn't complete. Knowledge and techniques may have survived in isolated pockets, preserved by groups who managed to weather the catastrophe and maintain their traditions across the millennia. One of the most compelling examples of this comes from the study of ancient astronomical knowledge. Researchers have found that many ancient cultures around the world possessed remarkably sophisticated understanding of celestial mechanics, knowledge that supposedly wasn't rediscovered until the development of modern astronomy. The ancient Maya calculated the length of the solar year to within minutes of the correct value. Ancient Babylonian astronomers tracked planetary movements with precision that wasn't matched again until the invention of the telescope. The builders of Stonehenge encoded complex astronomical calculations into the monument's structure thousands of years before such calculations were supposedly possible. This pattern suggests that astronomical knowledge and the mathematical sophistication required to apply it was much more widespread in the ancient world than we've assumed. And this brings us back to the Sphinx, because the astronomical alignments we discussed earlier aren't simple coincidences. They represent sophisticated understanding of precession, celestial mechanics, and long-term astronomical cycles. The precision of these alignments suggests that whoever built the Sphinx understood that the constellation rising with the sun during the equinox changes over time according to a predictable cycle. This isn't basic observational astronomy. This is advanced mathematical astronomy that requires generations of careful observation and record-keeping. Traditional archaeology suggests that this level of astronomical sophistication didn't develop until much later in human history. But if the Sphinx really does date to the period when Leo was rising with the equinox sun, it means this knowledge existed over 10,000 years ago. It means that the people who built the Sphinx were not primitive hunter-gatherers, but sophisticated astronomers with mathematical capabilities that we've dramatically underestimated. This interpretation is supported by other evidence from the Giza complex. The three main pyramids are aligned with remarkable precision to the cardinal directions. The Great Pyramid is oriented to true north with an accuracy that wasn't surpassed until the age of modern surveying instruments. The complex as a whole shows evidence of sophisticated site planning that takes into account not just the immediate terrain, but the relationship between different monuments across the entire plateau. If the Sphinx predates the pyramids by thousands of years, it suggests that this site was chosen and planned with incredible foresight. The later pyramid builders weren't just selecting a convenient location. They were adding to a complex that had already been designed with astronomical and geometric principles in mind. This level of long-term planning implies continuity of knowledge across vast periods of time. It suggests that whoever built the Sphinx passed on not just construction techniques, but also the astronomical and mathematical knowledge required to expand the complex in ways that maintained its overall coherence. But how could such knowledge survive across millennia? How could construction techniques and astronomical understanding be preserved through periods of climate change, population migration, and social upheaval? The answer might lie in the very monument we're discussing. What if the Sphinx wasn't just a sculpture, but a repository? What if it was designed not just to mark astronomical alignments, but to preserve knowledge for future generations? This idea isn't as far-fetched as it might seem. Ancient cultures around the world used monuments as libraries, encoding information in their structure, their alignments, their proportions. The Great Pyramid's internal dimensions encode mathematical constants like pi and the golden ratio. Stonehenge functions as a complex astronomical calculator. The temples of Angkor Wat map the Hindu cosmological model onto the landscape. Could the Sphinx serve a similar function? Could its proportions, its orientation, its relationship to the surrounding landscape encode information that we haven't learned to read yet? Some researchers think so, and they're developing increasingly sophisticated methods for analyzing ancient monuments as information storage systems. Dr. Robert Bauval, who identified the Orion correlation of the Giza pyramids, has proposed that the entire Giza complex functions as a kind of astronomical textbook, with different monuments representing different aspects of ancient Egyptian cosmology and astronomical knowledge. In this interpretation, the Sphinx doesn't just mark the equinox, it serves as a key for understanding the astronomical relationships encoded throughout the site. If this is correct, then the age of the Sphinx becomes even more significant. An older Sphinx would mean that this astronomical knowledge existed thousands of years before we thought, and that it was sophisticated enough to be encoded in permanent stone monuments designed to last for millennia. But encoding knowledge in stone monuments only works if there are people around to read and interpret that knowledge. This brings us to one of the most intriguing aspects of the older Sphinx hypothesis. What it implies about continuity of civilization in Egypt. The traditional narrative suggests that Egypt went through distinct phases: prehistoric hunter-gatherer societies, then the pre-dynastic period, then the sudden emergence of fully formed pharaonic civilization around 3100 BCE. But what if this narrative is incomplete? What if there was continuity between much earlier advanced cultures and the historical Egyptian civilization we know about? This possibility is supported by some fascinating linguistic evidence. Ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs include symbols and concepts that appear to preserve much older traditions. Some of the most fundamental religious and astronomical concepts in Egyptian culture show signs of being far older than the dynastic period when they were first written down. The concept of the pharaoh as a divine intermediary between earth and sky, the sophisticated understanding of stellar cycles, the complex mythological systems that governed Egyptian religious life, all of these show signs of having developed over much longer periods than traditional chronology allows. If the Sphinx really is thousands of years old, it would provide a physical link between these earlier traditions and the historical Egyptian civilization. It would suggest that the builders of the pyramids weren't creating something entirely new, but were continuing and expanding upon traditions that had been maintained for thousands of years. This interpretation helps explain some of the puzzling aspects of early Egyptian civilization. How did writing, monumental architecture, complex religious systems, and sophisticated astronomical knowledge all appear so suddenly in the archaeological record? The traditional answer is that these developments happened quickly during the pre-dynastic period. But we have relatively little evidence for this rapid development. An older Sphinx suggests a different possibility: that these developments took place over much longer periods, with knowledge and techniques being preserved and transmitted across millennia by cultures that left relatively little archaeological trace. The sudden appearance of advanced civilization in the historical record wouldn't represent the invention of these capabilities, but their emergence from a period of preservation and continuity that we don't fully understand yet. This pattern of hidden continuity might explain similar puzzles in other parts of the world. The sophisticated astronomical knowledge of the Maya, the advanced metallurgy of ancient Andean cultures, the complex engineering of megalithic sites across Europe, all of these might represent the emergence of knowledge traditions that had been preserved for much longer than we've realized. But if this knowledge was being preserved and transmitted, Where's the evidence? Why don't we see more traces of these earlier advanced cultures? The answer might lie in the very climate changes that we've been discussing. The end of the African humid period wasn't just a gradual shift from wet to dry conditions. Recent climate research suggests it was a rapid, catastrophic change that transformed the entire region within a few centuries. Rivers dried up, lakes disappeared, and vast areas that had supported large populations became uninhabitable desert. Archaeological evidence from this period shows signs of rapid abandonment of settlements, mass migration, and social collapse. People didn't have time to carefully preserve their libraries and workshops. They were fleeing for their lives as their entire world transformed around them. In this context, massive stone monuments become incredibly important as repositories of knowledge. Unlike wooden structures, papyrus scrolls, or metal artifacts, stone monuments can survive almost any catastrophe. They can preserve information across millennia of climate change, social upheaval, and cultural transformation. If the Sphinx really was built during the African humid period, it would have been designed to survive exactly the kind of catastrophic change that was about to transform the region. Its builders might have known that their civilization was vulnerable to climate change, and they might have deliberately created monuments that would preserve their most important knowledge for future generations. This interpretation transforms our understanding of what the Sphinx represents. Instead of just being a royal monument or a religious symbol, it becomes a message from a lost civilization, a carefully encoded repository of knowledge designed to survive the collapse of the culture that created it. But if this is true, if the Sphinx really is a message from our distant past, then we have a responsibility to learn how to read that message. We need to develop better techniques for analyzing ancient monuments as information storage systems. We need to be more open to evidence that challenges our preconceptions about the past. And we need to preserve these monuments for future generations who might develop even better methods for understanding what they're trying to tell us. The debate over the Sphinx's age isn't just an academic exercise. It's about our relationship with our own past, our willingness to acknowledge that our ancestors might have been far more sophisticated than we've assumed, and our responsibility to preserve and protect the monuments they left behind. Because if the Sphinx really is over 10,000 years old, if it really does preserve knowledge from a lost civilization, then it's not just Egypt's heritage, it's humanity's heritage. It's a direct link to a period of human development that we're only beginning to understand, and it might hold keys to understanding our own future. The questions keep multiplying, but so does the evidence. And as we continue to develop new technologies for studying the past, as we become more sophisticated in our methods for analyzing ancient monuments, the answers are starting to emerge. They're not the answers we expected, and they're not always comfortable, but they're based on evidence that's becoming harder and harder to ignore. The Sphinx has been waiting for us to ask the right questions. Maybe we're finally ready to hear the answers. As we stand at this crossroads between established archaeology and revolutionary evidence, we need to address the elephant in the room. Because what we're really talking about here isn't just about dating an ancient monument. We're talking about a complete paradigm shift in how we understand human civilization itself. The resistance to these ideas from mainstream academia has been fierce, and understandably so. When Dr. Robert Schoch first presented his geological evidence for an older Sphinx at the American Association for the Advancement of Science conference in 1992, the reaction was swift and brutal. Prominent Egyptologists didn't just disagree with his conclusions, they questioned his right to even have an opinion about Egyptian monuments. Dr. Mark Lehner, one of the world's leading experts on the Giza complex, dismissed Schoch's work as pseudoscience and argued that geological evidence should be secondary to archaeological and historical evidence. Dr. Zahi Hawass, then Egypt's most powerful archaeological authority, went even further, essentially banning Schoch from conducting further research at Giza and publicly ridiculing his conclusions. But here's what makes this reaction so telling. Instead of engaging with the geological evidence on its merits, the archaeological establishment chose to attack the messenger. They argued that because Schoch wasn't an Egyptologist, his observations about weathering patterns were somehow invalid. It was a classic case of academic territorialism, taking precedence over scientific inquiry. This response reveals something deeply troubling about how archaeological orthodoxy protects itself from challenging evidence. Rather than welcoming expertise from other fields, rather than embracing the interdisciplinary approach that has revolutionized so many other areas of science, archaeology often retreats into insularity when faced with evidence that threatens established timelines. But the evidence doesn't care about academic politics. And as more researchers from various fields have examined the Sphinx, the case for its greater antiquity has only grown stronger. Dr. Colin Reeder, a chartered engineer and geologist, has conducted his own independent analysis of the weathering patterns at Giza. His conclusions, published in peer-reviewed journals, support Schoch's basic findings while adding new layers of evidence. Reeder has shown that the weathering patterns on the Sphinx are not only consistent with rainfall erosion, but that they follow patterns that would be expected from the specific climate conditions that existed during the African humid period. More significantly, Reeder has identified what he calls the Sphinx problem, a series of engineering and construction anomalies that don't make sense if the monument was built during the 4th dynasty as part of Khafre's pyramid complex. The drainage systems around the Sphinx, the relationship between the monument and the surrounding temples, even the way the Sphinx enclosure was excavated. All of these show characteristics that are inconsistent with 4th dynasty construction practices. Reeder's work is particularly important because he's not just a geologist, he's an engineer with decades of experience in large-scale construction projects. When he looks at the Sphinx complex, he sees engineering decisions that don't match the pattern of other monuments from the same supposed period. He sees evidence of multiple construction phases spanning thousands of years, with the earliest phase dating to a time when the climate and landscape of the region were completely different. This engineering perspective has opened up new avenues of investigation that purely archaeological approaches had missed. By analysing the Sphinx as a construction project rather than just as an artifact, researchers are uncovering evidence of planning and execution methods that challenge fundamental assumptions about ancient Egyptian capabilities and timeline. But the most compelling new evidence comes from an unexpected source: the underground chambers beneath the Sphinx that we mentioned earlier. While Egyptian authorities have prevented excavation of these spaces, new non-invasive technologies are revealing details that are impossible to ignore. In 2014, a team of researchers led by Dr. Hawass himself conducted ground-penetrating radar surveys that confirmed the existence of multiple chambers beneath the Sphinx. The surveys revealed not just empty cavities, but structured spaces with walls, floors, and what appears to be deliberate architectural features. Most intriguingly, some of these chambers show evidence of containing objects, possibly artifacts or even written records. The irony is palpable. The same authorities who have dismissed evidence for the Sphinx's greater antiquity have now confirmed the existence of the very chambers that could contain proof of that antiquity. Yet they continue to refuse excavation, claiming that any disturbance of the monument would be too risky. This refusal has created a frustrating stalemate. We have tantalizing evidence of hidden chambers that might resolve the dating controversy once and for all, but we're prevented from investigating them by the very people who could authorize such investigation. It's a situation that has led some researchers to question whether the resistance to exploring these chambers is really about protecting the monument or about protecting the established narrative. The situation becomes even more complex when you consider the broader geopolitical implications of these discoveries. Egypt's tourism industry is built largely on the mystique of ancient pharaonic civilization. The pyramids and the Sphinx are not just archaeological sites, they're national symbols and major economic assets. Acknowledging that these monuments might be thousands of years older than currently believed could have significant implications for how Egypt presents its heritage to the world. But science shouldn't be held hostage to economic or political considerations. The truth about our past is too important to be suppressed for any reason. no matter how compelling those reasons might seem in the short term. Fortunately, new technologies are making it increasingly difficult to suppress inconvenient evidence. Satellite imagery, ground-penetrating radar, seismic surveys, and other remote sensing techniques are revealing details about ancient sites that can't be hidden or controlled by local authorities. Independent researchers around the world are analyzing this data and reaching conclusions that don't depend on official permission or cooperation. Dr. Carmen Bolter, a professor at the University of Calgary, has used satellite imagery to identify numerous sites around Egypt that show similar anomalies to those found at Giza. Her research suggests that the pattern of much older monuments incorporated into later construction projects extends far beyond just the Sphinx. She's documented sites throughout Egypt where the archaeological evidence points to construction phases separated by thousands of years. This broader pattern is incredibly significant because it suggests that the Sphinx isn't an isolated anomaly. Instead, it might be part of a much larger phenomenon, the incorporation of extremely ancient monuments into later Egyptian civilization. If this is correct, it would mean that pharaonic Egypt was built on the foundation of a much older culture, one that created monuments so impressive that later civilizations felt compelled to build around them rather than replace them. The implications extend well beyond Egypt. Around the world, researchers are finding similar patterns of ancient construction incorporated into later sites. In Peru, the massive foundation stones at Sacsayhuaman show construction techniques completely different from the Inca stonework built on top of them. In Lebanon, the enormous megalithic blocks at Baalbek appear to predate the Roman temple complex, built above them by thousands of years. This global pattern suggests that the phenomenon we're seeing at Giza isn't unique to Egypt. Instead, it might represent a worldwide legacy of an earlier period of human development, one that produced monuments so impressive that later civilizations chose to build upon them rather than start from scratch. But accepting this pattern requires us to fundamentally reconsider our understanding of human history. It means acknowledging that the development of civilization wasn't a simple linear progression from primitive to advanced. Instead, it might have been a much more complex process, with periods of advancement followed by decline, with knowledge and techniques being lost and rediscovered across vast spans of time. This cyclical view of human development isn't new. It appears in the historical traditions of many ancient cultures. The Greeks spoke of golden ages followed by periods of decline. Hindu cosmology describes vast cycles of creation and destruction spanning hundreds of thousands of years. Even the Bible contains references to antediluvian civilizations that were destroyed by global catastrophes. Modern archaeology has largely dismissed these traditional accounts as mythology, preferring to rely on physical evidence and scientific dating methods. But what if these traditions preserve genuine memories of much older periods of human development? What if the myths and legends that speak of advanced ancient civilizations aren't fantasies, but distorted memories of real historical events? This possibility becomes more compelling when you consider how accurately oral traditions can preserve information across vast periods of time. Australian Aboriginal traditions contain detailed accounts of geographical features that haven't existed for over 10,000 years. Native American traditions preserve memories of the end of the last ice age with remarkable accuracy. If oral traditions can preserve geographical and climatic information across such time spans, they might also preserve memories of human achievements from equally distant periods. The geological evidence for an older Sphinx fits perfectly into this framework. If the monument really was carved during the African humid period, it would represent exactly the kind of achievement that would be preserved in oral tradition. A massive stone sculpture created by people with capabilities that seemed almost magical to later generations living in a transformed landscape. But oral traditions aren't just preserving memories of individual monuments. They're preserving memories of entire civilizations, cultures that understood astronomy, mathematics, and engineering in ways that we're only beginning to appreciate. The builders of the Sphinx if they really did live over 10,000 years ago, weren't primitive hunter-gatherers. They were sophisticated people with knowledge and capabilities that allowed them to undertake massive construction projects that have survived to the present day. This interpretation is supported by recent discoveries at sites around the world that are pushing back the timeline of human achievement by thousands of years. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, which we've mentioned several times, features massive stone pillars carved with sophisticated artistic designs and arranged in complex patterns that suggest advanced understanding of geometry and astronomy. The site dates to over 11,000 years ago, a time when humans were supposedly living in small nomadic bands with no capacity for large-scale construction projects. But Göbekli Tepe isn't unique. Similar sites are being discovered across the globe, all dating to the same general time period, all showing evidence of capabilities that don't fit the traditional timeline of human development. In Armenia, the Karahunj Observatory features standing stones aligned with astronomical phenomena and dates to over 7,000 years ago. In Scotland, the cairns of Clava show sophisticated understanding of solar alignments and date to over 4,000 years ago, contemporary with the traditional dating of the Sphinx, but showing techniques that appear much older. These discoveries are creating a new picture of human development in the post-Ice Age period. Instead of gradual development from primitive to advanced societies, we're seeing evidence of sophisticated capabilities appearing suddenly in the archaeological record around 12,000 years ago, followed by what appears to be a period of decline and gradual recovery. This pattern matches perfectly with the climate data we discussed earlier. The end of the last ice age was a period of dramatic global change, with rising sea levels, shifting weather patterns, and massive population movements. It was also a period when human populations were freed from the constraints of Ice Age survival and could begin developing more complex societies. But this development wasn't uniform or continuous. The Younger Dryas period, from about 12,900 to 11,700 years ago, saw a temporary return to Ice Age conditions that would have disrupted human societies across the globe. The recovery from this climate crisis coincides almost exactly with the appearance of sophisticated monuments like Göbekli Tepe and, if the geological evidence is correct, the Sphinx. This timing isn't coincidental. It suggests that the period following the Younger Dryas was one of rapid human development, driven perhaps by the need to preserve knowledge and techniques that had been threatened by climate catastrophe. The monuments built during this period weren't just religious or ceremonial structures. They were repositories of knowledge, designed to survive future catastrophes and preserve crucial information for later generations. The Sphinx, in this interpretation, becomes not just a monument but a message, a deliberate attempt by our ancestors to communicate across vast spans of time. Its astronomical alignments encode information about celestial cycles. Its construction techniques preserve knowledge about stoneworking and large-scale engineering. Its very existence demonstrates human capabilities that we've dramatically underestimated. But if the Sphinx really is a message from our distant past, what is it trying to tell us? The answer might lie not just in its construction, but in its context, its relationship to the landscape, to other monuments, and to the astronomical phenomena it appears to track. Recent research has revealed that the Sphinx's orientation isn't just aligned with the equinox sunrise, it's also positioned to mark other significant astronomical events throughout the year. During the summer solstice, the sun sets directly behind the monument when viewed from specific locations within the Giza complex. During the winter solstice, the constellation Orion, which the ancient Egyptians associated with Osiris, the god of death and resurrection, rises directly in front of the Sphinx. These multiple alignments suggest that the Sphinx was designed as a kind of astronomical observatory, capable of tracking multiple celestial cycles simultaneously. This level of sophistication implies not just casual observation of the sky, but systematic study of astronomical phenomena over long periods of time. The mathematics required for such precise alignments are considerable. You need to understand not just the basic movements of the sun and stars, but also the effects of precession, the slow wobble of Earth's axis that causes the positions of stars to shift over thousands of years. You need to be able to predict how these positions will change over time and design monuments that will maintain their alignments across millennia. This level of astronomical and mathematical sophistication didn't supposedly develop until much later in human history. But if the Sphinx really does date to over 10,000 years ago, it means this knowledge existed far earlier than we've assumed. It means our ancestors were far more capable than we've given them credit for. More intriguingly, it suggests that the builders of the Sphinx were thinking in terms of vast timescales. They weren't just creating a monument for their own generation. They were creating something designed to function across thousands of years. They were deliberately encoding information for future civilizations to discover and decode. This long-term thinking implies a level of cultural continuity and planning that we rarely see in human societies. Most civilizations think in terms of generations or centuries at best, but the builders of the Sphinx appear to have been thinking in terms of millennia. They were creating monuments designed to outlast not just their own civilization, but multiple cycles of human development and decline. This perspective transforms our understanding of what the Sphinx represents. Instead of just being an artifact of a particular culture at a particular time, it becomes a bridge between vastly different periods of human history. It becomes a physical link between the world that existed over 10,000 years ago and the world we inhabit today. But this interpretation also raises profound questions about the nature of human civilization itself. If our ancestors really were capable of this level of planning and construction, what happened to that knowledge? Why don't we have more evidence of their achievements? And perhaps most importantly, what can we learn from their example? These are the questions that make the Sphinx controversy so much more than just an academic debate about dating an ancient monument. They're questions about who we are as a species, about what we're capable of achieving, and about our relationship with our own past. The evidence is mounting that the Sphinx is far older than we've been taught. The geological evidence, the astronomical alignments, the construction anomalies, the global context of similar monuments, all of it points toward a much more ancient origin. But accepting this evidence means accepting a fundamentally different view of human history. It means acknowledging that our ancestors were far more sophisticated than we've assumed. It means recognizing that human civilization is far older and far more complex than our textbooks teach. And it means opening ourselves to the possibility that there's still much we don't understand about our own past. The Sphinx stands there in the desert, weathered by thousands of years of wind and sand, still keeping its secrets. But those secrets are slowly being revealed, one piece of evidence at a time, and as they emerge, they're painting a picture of human history that's far more mysterious, far more ancient, and far more magnificent than we ever dared to imagine. The question is, are we ready to listen to what our ancestors were trying to tell us? Are we prepared to abandon comfortable assumptions in favor of a more complex but ultimately more inspiring view of human achievement? The Sphinx has been waiting for thousands of years for us to ask the right questions. Maybe we're finally ready to hear the answers. As we piece together all these threads of evidence, geological, astronomical, archaeological, and textual, we're forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. The scientific method demands that we follow the evidence wherever it leads, even when it challenges our most cherished assumptions about the past. But there's another dimension to this story that we haven't fully explored yet. One that might explain not just the age of the Sphinx, but why the evidence for its antiquity has been so consistently overlooked or dismissed. It's a dimension that takes us beyond geology and astronomy into the realm of human psychology and institutional inertia. Think about how academic careers are built in archaeology. Professors spend decades specializing in particular periods, particular cultures, particular interpretations of the past. Their reputations, their funding, their very identities become tied to specific theories about how civilization developed. When evidence emerges that challenges those theories, it's not just abstract knowledge that's at stake. it's people's entire professional lives. This creates what philosophers of science call paradigm lock, a situation where an entire field becomes so invested in a particular way of understanding the world that it literally cannot see evidence that contradicts that understanding. The evidence isn't hidden or suppressed in some conspiracy. It's simply filtered out by minds that have been trained to interpret everything through a specific lens. Dr. Thomas Kuhn, in his groundbreaking work on scientific revolutions, showed how this process works across all fields of science. Established paradigms don't fall because someone proves them wrong with a single decisive experiment. They fall when anomalies accumulate to the point where the old framework can no longer accommodate them, and when a new generation of researchers emerges who weren't trained to see the world through the old lens. We might be witnessing exactly this process with the Sphinx controversy. The anomalies are accumulating, geological evidence that doesn't fit the timeline, astronomical alignments that suggest much older origins, construction techniques that don't match the supposed period, underground chambers that remain unexplored. Each piece of evidence by itself might be dismissed or explained away, but together they're creating a picture that's increasingly difficult to ignore. What makes this process particularly fascinating is how it's being accelerated by technological advances that weren't available to earlier generations of researchers. When the Sphinx was first seriously studied in the 19th and early 20th centuries, archaeologists had to rely primarily on visual observation and basic measurement tools. They couldn't see beneath the surface, couldn't analyze weathering patterns with precision, couldn't run complex astronomical calculations to test alignment theories. Today, we have ground-penetrating radar that can map underground structures, spectrographic analysis that can determine the age and composition of stone surfaces, computer modeling that can recreate ancient skies with perfect accuracy, and satellite imagery that can reveal patterns invisible from ground level. These tools are revealing details about ancient monuments that their builders might never have expected us to discover. But here's what's really remarkable. The more sophisticated our analysis becomes, the more mysterious these ancient monuments appear. Instead of confirming our assumptions about primitive ancient builders working with basic tools, advanced analysis is revealing evidence of capabilities that we struggle to explain even with modern technology. Take the precision of the Sphinx's astronomical alignments, for instance. When you account for the effects of precession over thousands of years, the mathematics required to achieve these alignments becomes incredibly complex. You need to understand not just current star positions, but how those positions will change over millennia. You need to be able to predict the future positions of celestial objects with extraordinary accuracy. This isn't the kind of knowledge you develop by casual observation of the night sky. This is systematic, mathematical astronomy that requires generations of careful record-keeping and sophisticated understanding of celestial mechanics. The fact that such knowledge might have existed over 10,000 years ago challenges everything we think we know about the development of human intellectual capabilities. But the astronomical evidence is just one piece of a much larger puzzle. As researchers have applied increasingly sophisticated analytical techniques to the Sphinx and surrounding monuments, they've uncovered layer upon layer of anomalies that don't fit the conventional timeline. Chemical analysis of the limestone surfaces has revealed weathering patterns that are inconsistent with the supposed age of the monument. Acoustic studies of the Sphinx enclosure have detected underground chambers and passages that don't appear on any ancient plans. Even seismic analysis has revealed structural anomalies that suggest the monument has a much more complex history than previously understood. Perhaps most intriguingly, recent advances in genetic archaeology, the study of how human populations moved and developed over time, are providing new context for understanding ancient construction projects. DNA analysis of ancient human remains from the Mediterranean region shows complex patterns of migration and cultural exchange that don't match the simplified narratives we've been taught about ancient civilizations. These genetic studies reveal that the populations of North Africa and the Middle East underwent significant changes during the period when the climate was shifting from the African humid period to the desert conditions we see today. Large-scale population movements, cultural exchanges, and technological transfers were occurring across vast distances. Exactly the kind of conditions that could explain how sophisticated construction techniques and astronomical knowledge could spread rapidly across different regions. This genetic evidence provides a plausible mechanism for how the builders of the Sphinx could have possessed advanced knowledge and techniques. Instead of developing in isolation, they were part of a complex network of human populations that were sharing information and technologies across vast distances. When climate change forced massive population movements, this knowledge would have been carried to new regions and adapted to local conditions. The implications of this new understanding extend far beyond just the Sphinx. If human populations were more mobile and more interconnected in the ancient world than we've assumed, it means that the development of civilization was a much more complex and dynamic process than our textbooks suggest. Knowledge and techniques could spread rapidly across continents, allowing innovations developed in one region to be applied in completely different environments. This model helps explain one of the most puzzling aspects of ancient history: why similar construction techniques and astronomical knowledge appear simultaneously in widely separated parts of the world. Instead of independent invention, we might be seeing the results of a connected network of human populations sharing information across vast distances. But this interconnected model of ancient civilization raises another profound question. If these networks existed, if ancient peoples were sharing knowledge and techniques across continents, what happened to disrupt these connections? Why do we see evidence of advanced capabilities in the deep past, followed by what appears to be a decline in sophistication? The answer might lie in the very climate changes that we've been discussing throughout this investigation. The end of the African humid period wasn't just a local phenomenon affecting Egypt and North Africa. It was part of a global climate shift that transformed environments across multiple continents. The same forces that turned the Sahara into a desert were affecting weather patterns, sea levels, and agricultural conditions worldwide. Recent climate research has revealed that this transition wasn't gradual, it was catastrophically rapid. In some regions, the shift from fertile to arid conditions occurred within decades rather than centuries. Entire river systems disappeared. Lakes that had supported large populations for thousands of years dried up completely. Coastal areas that had been centers of human habitation were flooded by rising sea levels. This kind of rapid, dramatic environmental change would have been devastating for any civilization, no matter how advanced. Populations would have been forced to abandon their traditional territories and migrate to new regions. Trade networks would have been disrupted. Knowledge that had been passed down through generations would have been lost as communities scattered and struggled to survive. In this context, the construction of massive stone monuments takes on new significance. These weren't just religious symbols or royal tombs. They were attempts to preserve crucial knowledge through periods of catastrophic change. Stone monuments could survive climate shifts that would destroy libraries, workshops, and entire cities. They could encode information in forms that would remain accessible even after the cultures that created them had vanished. The Sphinx, if it really was built during this period of climate transition, would represent exactly this kind of preservation effort. Its builders, perhaps recognizing that their civilization was vulnerable to environmental catastrophe, created a monument designed to survive whatever changes were coming. They encoded their most important knowledge, astronomical observations, mathematical principles, construction techniques, in permanent stone form. This interpretation transforms our understanding of what ancient monuments represent. Instead of just being artifacts of particular cultures, they become libraries designed to preserve human knowledge across vast spans of time. They become messages from our ancestors, warnings about the vulnerability of civilization, and repositories of wisdom that we're only beginning to learn how to read. But this interpretation also carries a sobering message for our own time. We're currently living through another period of rapid climate change, one that's disrupting environments and forcing population movements on a global scale. The knowledge and techniques that our ancestors tried to preserve in stone monuments might be more relevant to our current situation than we've realized. The builders of the Sphinx, if they really did live through the end of the African humid period, experienced firsthand what happens when stable climate conditions suddenly shift. They saw fertile regions become uninhabitable deserts. They witnessed the collapse of established trade networks and social systems. They lived through the kind of environmental catastrophe that we're now trying to prepare for ourselves. Their response, to encode crucial knowledge in permanent, durable forms, might offer lessons for how we can preserve our own civilization's achievements through the climate changes we're currently experiencing. Instead of relying on digital storage systems that might not survive long-term environmental disruption, we might need to think about more permanent ways of preserving crucial information. This brings us back to the fundamental question that's been driving this entire investigation. What is the Sphinx trying to tell us? If it really is a message from our distant past, what information were its builders trying to preserve? The astronomical alignments suggest they wanted to preserve knowledge about celestial cycles and mathematical principles. The construction techniques demonstrate sophisticated understanding of engineering and stoneworking. The very survival of the monument shows their mastery of creating structures designed to last for millennia. But perhaps the most important message is simply this: that human beings are capable of far more than we usually give ourselves credit for. That our ancestors, working with tools and techniques we don't fully understand, created monuments that continue to challenge our understanding thousands of years later. That human ingenuity and determination can create things that outlast empires, climate changes, and the rise and fall of entire civilizations. This message is particularly relevant as we face our own civilizational challenges: climate change, technological disruption, social upheaval. The forces reshaping our world today aren't fundamentally different from those that challenged our ancestors. The scale might be different, the specific technologies might be more advanced, but the basic human challenge remains the same. How do we preserve what's valuable while adapting to changing conditions? The Sphinx has been answering that question for thousands of years. It has survived climate change, conquest, neglect, and countless attempts to unlock its secrets. It has weathered sandstorms and flash floods, earthquakes and human interference. And through it all, it has continued to guard whatever knowledge its builders encoded in its stone. As we develop better technologies for analyzing ancient monuments, as we become more sophisticated in our understanding of how information can be encoded in physical structures, we're finally beginning to decode some of these ancient messages. But the process is far from complete. There are still chambers beneath the Sphinx that remain unexplored. There are still aspects of its construction that we don't fully understand. There are still questions about its true age and purpose that remain unanswered. But perhaps that's exactly as it should be. Perhaps the Sphinx was designed not to reveal all its secrets at once, but to serve as a continuing challenge to each generation of humans who encounter it. Perhaps its builders understood that the process of trying to understand ancient wisdom is just as important as the wisdom itself. Each generation that studies the Sphinx brings new tools, new perspectives, new questions to the investigation. The 19th century archaeologists who first seriously studied the monument asked different questions than the geologists and astronomers who are studying it today. Future generations, with technologies we can't yet imagine, will undoubtedly discover aspects of the monument that we can't currently detect. This ongoing process of discovery and rediscovery might be exactly what the Sphinx's builders intended. Instead of creating a monument that would reveal its secrets once and be forgotten, they created something that would continue to challenge and inspire human curiosity across thousands of years. They created a puzzle that would grow more complex and more fascinating as human knowledge and technology advanced. In this sense, the controversy over the Sphinx's age isn't a problem to be solved. It's a conversation that's been going on for millennia between the monument's builders and everyone who has encountered it since. Each piece of evidence we uncover, each new theory we develop, each question we ask, is part of this ongoing dialogue between past and present. The geological evidence that suggests a much older origin, the astronomical alignments that encode sophisticated mathematical knowledge, the construction anomalies that challenge our assumptions about ancient capabilities, all of these are part of the message that the Sphinx has been patiently delivering across the centuries. But the most profound part of that message might be the simple fact that it exists at all. In a world where most human creations are temporary, where technologies become obsolete within decades, where entire civilizations rise and fall within centuries, the Sphinx stands as proof that human beings can create things of lasting significance. Its builders, whoever they were, and whenever they lived, succeeded in creating something that would outlast their own civilization, their own climate, their own understanding of the world. They succeeded in encoding knowledge in a form that would remain accessible across vast spans of time. They succeeded in creating a monument that would continue to inspire wonder and curiosity thousands of years after their own names were forgotten. That achievement, regardless of exactly when it occurred, represents one of the highest expressions of human ambition and capability. It represents our species' unique ability to think beyond our own lifespans, to create things intended for future generations we'll never meet, to encode our understanding of the world in forms that can survive the collapse of the civilizations that created them. As we continue to study the Sphinx, as we develop new technologies for analyzing its secrets, as we uncover more evidence about its true age and purpose, we're not just learning about the past, we're learning about what human beings are capable of when they think in terms of millennia rather than years, when they create not just for themselves, but for all the generations that will come after them. That might be the most important lesson the Sphinx has to teach us. Not just information about ancient astronomy or construction techniques, but a demonstration of what becomes possible when human creativity is focused on creating something truly lasting. In our age of rapid change and temporary solutions, that lesson is more relevant than ever. The Sphinx has been keeping its secrets for thousands of years, but it's been sharing its most important message all along. That human beings, working with dedication and vision, can create things that transcend the limitations of any single lifetime or civilization. That knowledge, once properly encoded, can survive the rise and fall of empires. That the questions we ask and the monuments we build today might still be inspiring wonder and discovery thousands of years in the future. As we stand before this ancient monument, whether in person or in imagination, we're not just looking at a relic of the past. We're looking at a bridge between our ancestors and ourselves, between the knowledge they tried to preserve and the questions we're still learning to ask. We're participating in a conversation that began thousands of years ago and shows no signs of ending anytime soon. The Sphinx has weathered sandstorms and conquests, climate change and human interference. It has survived the collapse of the civilization that supposedly built it, and the rise of new civilizations that claim it as their heritage. Through it all, it has continued to guard its secrets, while slowly, patiently, revealing them to each generation that approaches with the right combination of technology, curiosity, and respect. We may never know with absolute certainty exactly when the Sphinx was built or who built it, but we're learning to appreciate something perhaps more important, that our ancestors, regardless of when they lived, were capable of achievements that continue to challenge our understanding thousands of years later. They were capable of thinking in terms of geological timescales, of encoding knowledge in forms designed to survive catastrophic change, of creating monuments that would continue to inspire and educate long after their own civilizations had vanished. That capability, that vision, that dedication to creating something lasting in a world of constant change might be the most precious inheritance they left us. And the Sphinx, standing silent in the desert, continues to embody that inheritance, challenging each new generation to reach beyond their immediate concerns and create something truly worthy of the long arc of human history. The debate over its age will continue. New evidence will emerge. New technologies will reveal previously hidden details. New theories will be proposed and tested. But through it all, the Sphinx will remain what it has always been: a testament to human ambition, a repository of ancient wisdom, and a challenge to never stop asking questions about who we are and where we came from, because in the end, that might be the most important question of all. Not just when was the Sphinx built, but what does its existence tell us about the heights that human civilization can reach when it sets its sights not on temporary gains, but on permanent achievements? What does it teach us about our responsibility to future generations? What does it reveal about the knowledge and capabilities that might be hidden in our own past, waiting to be rediscovered? These are the questions that make the Sphinx more than just an archaeological curiosity. They're the questions that make it a mirror, reflecting back our own potential for creating something that will outlast our own time and continue to inspire wonder long after we're gone. The ancient builders succeeded in creating such a monument. The question for us is, what will we create that future generations will still be studying, still be wondering about, still be learning from thousands of years from now? The Sphinx has been asking us that question for millennia. Maybe it's time we started taking it seriously. But what if the silence itself is the most telling evidence of all? What if the reason we're not finding more traces of these ancient builders isn't because they didn't exist, but because they understood something about the nature of time and preservation that we're only beginning to grasp? Consider this. Every civilization that has ever existed has faced the same fundamental challenge. How do you preserve what matters most when everything around you is constantly changing? How do you ensure that your most important discoveries, your deepest understanding of the world, your greatest achievements survive not just the collapse of your own society, but the rise and fall of all the societies that come after? Most civilizations have tried to solve this problem through accumulation. They build vast libraries, create detailed records, construct elaborate archives. But there's a fatal flaw in this approach. Libraries burn, records decay, archives are lost or destroyed. The more information you try to preserve, the more vulnerable it becomes to catastrophic loss. The builders of the Sphinx, if our analysis is correct, chose a radically different approach. Instead of trying to preserve everything, they encoded only the most essential knowledge in the most durable possible form. Instead of creating fragile repositories that could be destroyed in a single catastrophic event, they created a monument designed to survive anything the world could throw at it. This philosophy of selective preservation explains why we don't find vast libraries or detailed records from these early builders. They understood that information has a half-life, that the more complex and detailed your records become, the more likely they are to be misunderstood or lost entirely as languages change and civilizations rise and fall. But mathematical relationships, astronomical alignments, construction principles embedded in stone, these forms of information are universal. They don't depend on specific languages or cultural contexts. They can be understood by any civilization that develops sufficient mathematical and engineering sophistication, regardless of when or where that civilization emerges. In this light, the Sphinx becomes something unprecedented in human history, a successful attempt at truly long-term communication. Its builders managed to encode information in a form that has remained accessible across vast spans of time, through multiple cycles of civilizational rise and fall, through dramatic climate changes and cultural transformations. But here's what makes this achievement even more remarkable. The information they chose to preserve wasn't just technical knowledge about astronomy or construction. They preserved something far more profound. Proof that human beings are capable of thinking and planning across geological timescales. Every aspect of the Sphinx's design demonstrates this deep time perspective. The astronomical alignments that account for thousands of years of precession. The construction techniques that prioritize durability over efficiency. The very scale of the project, which would have required multiple generations to complete. All of it points to builders who were thinking not in terms of their own lifetimes, but in terms of the entire future of human civilization. This perspective is almost impossible for us to comprehend in our current age of rapid change and short-term thinking. We live in a world where most of our technologies become obsolete within years, where most of our institutions struggle to maintain continuity across decades, where most of our planning horizons extend no further than a few generations at most. But the builders of the Sphinx were thinking in terms of tens of thousands of years. They were creating something designed to function as a repository of knowledge across time spans that encompass the entire recorded history of human civilization. They were encoding messages for future humans they would never meet, living in societies they could never imagine, facing challenges they could never predict. This deep time perspective might be the most valuable thing we can learn from studying the Sphinx. Not just the specific technical knowledge that might be encoded in its structure, but the philosophical framework that made such encoding possible in the first place. Because we're currently facing challenges that require exactly this kind of long-term thinking. Climate change operates on timescales that span centuries. Nuclear waste remains dangerous for thousands of years. The decisions we make about genetic engineering and artificial intelligence will affect human development for millennia to come. Yet most of our decision-making processes are optimized for much shorter time horizons. Politicians think in terms of election cycles. Corporations focus on quarterly profits. Even our most ambitious scientific projects rarely extend beyond the careers of the researchers who initiate them. The Sphinx demonstrates that human beings are capable of much longer-term thinking, when the stakes are high enough and the vision is clear enough. Its builders managed to coordinate efforts across multiple generations to maintain focus on goals that extended far beyond any individual lifetime, to create something designed to function across spans of time that dwarf any single human society. How did they do it? How did they maintain institutional continuity across the centuries or millennia that such a project would have required? How did they ensure that the knowledge necessary to complete and maintain the monument would be preserved across generations? These are questions that go to the heart of what makes human civilization possible. They're questions about how knowledge is transmitted, how institutions maintain continuity, how societies can coordinate efforts toward goals that extend beyond the lifetime of any individual participant. The traditional archaeological model suggests that such coordination wasn't possible in the ancient world, that early human societies lacked the institutional sophistication necessary for truly long-term projects. But the evidence of the Sphinx suggests otherwise. It suggests that our ancestors developed methods for maintaining continuity and coordination that we don't fully understand yet. Part of the answer might lie in the very durability of the information encoding systems they used. Instead of relying on written records that could be lost or misinterpreted, they embedded crucial knowledge directly in the structure of their monuments. The knowledge necessary to understand and maintain these structures wasn't stored in external libraries. It was built into the monuments themselves. This approach creates a kind of self-reinforcing knowledge preservation system. Each generation that studies the monument learns not just the specific information encoded in its structure, but also the methods used to encode that information. The monument becomes both library and school, both repository and teacher. But this system only works if each generation maintains the curiosity and analytical capability necessary to continue decoding the monument's messages. If a society loses interest in understanding its ancient monuments, if it lacks the mathematical and engineering sophistication necessary to analyze their construction, then the information they contain becomes inaccessible even though it remains physically present. This might explain why the Sphinx's secrets have remained hidden for so long. The knowledge necessary to decode its messages has only recently been redeveloped as our understanding of geology, astronomy, and engineering has reached sufficient sophistication. Earlier generations simply lacked the tools necessary to read what the monument was trying to tell them. In this sense, the Sphinx has been waiting for us. Its builders encoded information designed to be accessible to a civilization that had developed certain analytical capabilities. And we're only now reaching the point where we can begin to understand what they were trying to communicate. But this raises another profound question. If the Sphinx was designed to be decoded by a future civilization with advanced analytical capabilities, what does that tell us about the builders' understanding of how human knowledge develops over time? They seem to have understood that knowledge doesn't develop in a straight line, that civilizations rise and fall, that techniques and understanding can be lost and then rediscovered centuries or millennia later. They seem to have anticipated that their own civilization might disappear, but that eventually another civilization would emerge with the capability to understand what they had created. This suggests a remarkably sophisticated understanding of the cyclical nature of human development. Instead of assuming that their own society represented the pinnacle of human achievement, they seem to have understood that they were part of a much longer process of civilizational development that would continue long after they were gone. This perspective is both humbling and inspiring. Humbling because it suggests that our own civilization, despite all its technological achievements, might not represent the ultimate expression of human capability. Inspiring because it suggests that human knowledge and understanding can survive even the collapse of the civilizations that create it. The builders of the Sphinx managed to preserve their most important insights across thousands of years of civilizational change. They created a monument that has continued to function as intended across vast spans of time, through the rise and fall of empires, through dramatic changes in human understanding of the world. Their success demonstrates that it's possible to create things that transcend the limitations of any single civilization. It shows that human knowledge, properly encoded, can survive almost any catastrophe. It proves that our species is capable of thinking and planning across timescales that encompass the entire span of recorded history. But perhaps most importantly, it shows us that we have a responsibility to future generations that extends far beyond our immediate concerns. Just as the builders of the Sphinx created something designed to benefit civilizations they would never see, we need to think about what we're creating for the civilizations that will come after us. What knowledge are we preserving for future generations? What monuments are we building that will continue to function across centuries or millennia? What messages are we encoding for humans who will live in a world we can't imagine, facing challenges we can't predict? These aren't abstract philosophical questions. They're practical challenges that require immediate attention. We're currently making decisions about nuclear waste storage that will affect human societies for thousands of years. We're developing artificial intelligence systems that could reshape human civilization in ways we can't foresee. We're altering the global climate in ways that will have consequences for millennia. Yet most of these decisions are being made with relatively short-term considerations in mind. We're optimizing for immediate benefits or risks, not for the long-term consequences that will affect countless future generations. The Sphinx reminds us that human beings are capable of much longer-term thinking when the situation demands it. Its builders managed to create something that has continued to serve its intended function across thousands of years. They demonstrate that it's possible to encode knowledge in forms that remain accessible across vast spans of time. We need to learn from their example. We need to develop our own methods for preserving crucial knowledge across the kinds of time spans that encompass multiple cycles of civilizational development. We need to think about what future civilizations will need to know about our time, our achievements, our mistakes. But we also need to develop the humility to recognize that our current understanding of the world might not be the final word. Just as the builders of the Sphinx encoded their knowledge in forms that could be understood by future civilizations with different capabilities and perspectives, we need to preserve our knowledge in ways that will remain accessible even if future societies develop radically different approaches to understanding the world. This requires us to think not just about what information to preserve, but about how to preserve it in forms that will remain meaningful across vast changes in human society and understanding. It requires us to consider not just the content of our knowledge, but the methods and principles that make that knowledge possible. The Sphinx has been teaching us these lessons for thousands of years. Its builders succeeded in creating something that continues to challenge and inspire us across vast spans of time. They managed to encode information in forms that remain accessible despite dramatic changes in human society, technology, and understanding. Their achievement stands as proof that human beings are capable of creating things of truly lasting significance. It demonstrates that our species can think and plan across geological timescales when the stakes are high enough and the vision is clear enough. As we continue to study the Sphinx, as we develop new technologies for analyzing its secrets, as we uncover more evidence about its true age and purpose, we're not just learning about the past. We're learning about our own potential for creating things that will outlast our own civilizations and continue to serve future generations we'll never meet. That might be the most important lesson the ancient builders have to teach us. Not just specific technical knowledge about astronomy or construction, but a demonstration of what becomes possible when human creativity is focused on creating something truly permanent in a world of constant change. The Sphinx has been waiting for us to learn this lesson for thousands of years. The question is, what will we do with this knowledge now that we're finally beginning to understand it? The silence from mainstream archaeology in the face of mounting evidence isn't just professional stubbornness. It's something deeper, something that reveals how academic institutions protect themselves when confronted with paradigm-shifting discoveries. Because what we're really witnessing here isn't just a debate about an ancient monument. We're watching the slow, sometimes painful process of scientific revolution in real time. And here's what makes this particularly fascinating. The very technologies that are revealing the Sphinx's secrets are also making it impossible for the archaeological establishment to simply ignore the evidence. You can dismiss one researcher's conclusions. You can question their methodology or their credentials. But when multiple independent teams using different technologies all arrive at similar conclusions, dismissal becomes much more difficult. Ground-penetrating radar doesn't have career ambitions. Geological analysis doesn't care about academic reputations. Astronomical calculations don't respect institutional hierarchies. The evidence is what it is, regardless of how uncomfortable it makes people feel. But perhaps the most telling aspect of this entire controversy is what it reveals about the nature of human knowledge itself. Because if the Sphinx really is thousands of years older than we thought, it means that sophisticated human capabilities, advanced astronomy, precise mathematics, large-scale engineering, existed during periods when we assumed they were impossible. This isn't just about rewriting textbooks. This is about fundamentally reconsidering what human beings are capable of achieving when they set their minds to it. It's about recognizing that the neat progression from primitive to advanced that we teach in schools might be a dangerous oversimplification of a much more complex reality. Recent discoveries at other sites around the world are supporting this more complex view of human development. In Turkey, Göbekli Tepe continues to yield evidence of sophisticated astronomical knowledge dating back over 11,000 years. In Peru, the precision of ancient stonework rivals anything modern engineering can produce. In Malta, underground temples show acoustic properties that suggest advanced understanding of sound and architecture. Each of these discoveries, taken individually, might be dismissed as an anomaly. But together, they're painting a picture of human capability in the ancient world that challenges our most basic assumptions about how civilization develops. The pattern is becoming impossible to ignore. Around the world, at sites separated by thousands of miles and supposedly built by cultures with no contact with each other, we're finding evidence of similar capabilities appearing at roughly the same time. Advanced astronomical knowledge, precise mathematical understanding, sophisticated engineering techniques, massive construction projects that required coordination across generations. This isn't coincidence. This is evidence of human capabilities that were far more widespread in the ancient world than we've been willing to acknowledge. And the Sphinx, with its geological evidence of extreme antiquity, fits perfectly into this global pattern. But accepting this pattern requires us to abandon one of our most cherished assumptions about human progress. The idea that we've been steadily advancing from primitive beginnings to our current level of sophistication. Instead, we might need to accept that human development has been cyclical, with periods of advancement followed by decline, with knowledge being lost and rediscovered across vast spans of time. This cyclical view of human history isn't new. Ancient cultures around the world preserved traditions of golden ages, followed by periods of decline. The Greeks spoke of ages of gold, silver, bronze, and iron. Hindu cosmology describes vast cycles of creation and destruction. Even biblical traditions reference antediluvian civilizations that were destroyed by global catastrophes. Modern archaeology has largely dismissed these traditions as mythology. But what if they preserve genuine memories of real historical cycles? What if the evidence we're finding at sites like the Sphinx represents not the beginning of human civilization, but a recovery from an earlier period of decline? This possibility becomes more compelling when you consider the timeline. The proposed older dating of the Sphinx places its construction at the end of the Younger Dryas period, a time of dramatic global climate change that marked the transition from the last ice age to modern conditions. This was a period of massive environmental disruption, rising sea levels, and forced human migration on a global scale. Archaeological evidence from this period shows signs of rapid cultural change, population movement, and the abandonment of established settlements. It was a time when human societies would have been under enormous pressure to preserve their most important knowledge in forms that could survive catastrophic change. In this context, the construction of massive stone monuments takes on new significance. These weren't just religious symbols or royal tombs. They were libraries designed to preserve crucial knowledge through periods of civilizational collapse. They were messages from our ancestors, encoded in the most durable materials available, designed to remain accessible even after the cultures that created them had vanished. The Sphinx, if it really was built during this period of transition, would represent exactly this kind of preservation effort. Its builders, perhaps recognizing that their world was about to change dramatically, created a monument designed to survive whatever was coming. They encoded their most important knowledge, astronomical observations, mathematical principles, construction techniques, in permanent stone form. But they did more than just preserve information. They created a challenge for future generations. The Sphinx isn't just a repository of ancient knowledge. It's a test of human analytical capability. Its secrets can only be unlocked by civilizations that have developed sufficient mathematical, engineering, and scientific sophistication. This suggests that its builders understood something profound about the nature of knowledge and civilization. They understood that information without the capability to understand it is worthless. They created a monument that would only yield its secrets to societies that had earned the right to receive them through their own intellectual development. We might be reaching that point now. After thousands of years of human development, we're finally developing the analytical tools necessary to understand what the Sphinx is trying to tell us. Our satellites can map underground chambers. Our computers can calculate ancient astronomical alignments. Our geological instruments can analyze weathering patterns with unprecedented precision. But we're also developing something equally important: the humility to recognize that our ancestors might have been far more capable than we've assumed. We're learning to approach ancient monuments not as primitive artifacts to be catalogued and dismissed, but as sophisticated creations that might still have things to teach us. This shift in perspective is crucial because the challenges we're facing today aren't fundamentally different from those our ancestors faced. Climate change, resource depletion, social upheaval, technological disruption, these are recurring themes in human history. The specific details might change, but the basic challenges remain the same. Our ancestors who lived through the end of the last ice age dealt with rapid climate change on a global scale. They experienced rising sea levels, shifting weather patterns, and massive population displacements. They had to find ways to preserve crucial knowledge through periods of social collapse and environmental catastrophe. Their solutions: encoding information in durable stone monuments, creating symbols and alignments that could be understood across cultural boundaries, designing structures that would continue to function across vast spans of time. might offer insights for how we can address similar challenges in our own time. But we can only learn from their example if we're willing to acknowledge that they had something valuable to teach us. And that requires abandoning the comfortable assumption that we represent the pinnacle of human achievement, that our ancestors were necessarily less capable than we are. The evidence of the Sphinx suggests otherwise. It suggests that human ingenuity, determination, and long-term thinking can create things that transcend the limitations of any single civilization. It demonstrates that our species is capable of achievements that remain impressive even by modern standards. The question is whether we're willing to learn from this example. Are we prepared to think in terms of the kinds of timescales that guided the Sphinx's builders? Can we create things designed to function across centuries or millennia, rather than just years or decades? These aren't abstract philosophical questions. They're practical challenges that require immediate attention. We're making decisions today about nuclear waste storage, genetic engineering, artificial intelligence, and climate intervention that will affect human societies for thousands of years. Yet most of these decisions are being made with relatively short-term considerations in mind. The Sphinx reminds us that human beings are capable of much longer-term thinking when the situation demands it. Its builders managed to coordinate efforts across multiple generations to maintain focus on goals that extended far beyond any individual lifetime, to create something designed to benefit civilizations they would never see. Their success demonstrates that such long-term thinking is possible. It shows that human knowledge, properly encoded, can survive almost any catastrophe. It proves that our species can create things of truly lasting significance when we set our minds to it. But it also shows us that such achievements require a fundamental shift in how we think about time, progress, and our responsibilities to future generations. We need to develop the kind of deep time perspective that guided the Sphinx's builders. We need to learn to think not just about immediate benefits and costs, but about consequences that will unfold across centuries or millennia. This isn't easy. Our brains are evolved to focus on immediate threats and opportunities. Our economic systems are optimized for short-term gains. Our political institutions struggle to address challenges that extend beyond election cycles, but the Sphinx proves that these limitations can be overcome. Somehow its builders managed to transcend the normal human tendency towards short-term thinking. They created something designed to function across timescales that encompass the entire recorded history of human civilization. How they accomplished this remains one of the great mysteries of human history. But perhaps that's the point. Perhaps the mystery itself is part of the message. Perhaps the Sphinx is teaching us that the greatest human achievements require us to reach beyond our normal limitations, to think and plan and dream on scales that seem impossible until someone actually does it. The builders of the Sphinx succeeded in creating something that has continued to challenge and inspire us across thousands of years. They managed to encode knowledge in forms that remain accessible despite dramatic changes in human society and understanding. They demonstrated that human creativity, properly focused, can create things that outlast empires, climate changes, and the rise and fall of entire civilizations. That achievement stands as one of the highest expressions of human potential. It represents our species' unique ability to think beyond our own lifespans, to create things intended for future generations we'll never meet, to encode our understanding of the world in forms that can survive whatever changes are coming. As we continue to unlock the Sphinx's secrets, as we develop new technologies for analyzing its hidden chambers and decoding its astronomical alignments, we're not just learning about the past. We're discovering what human beings are capable of when they think in terms of geological timescales, when they create not just for themselves, but for all the generations that will come after them. The Sphinx has been keeping its secrets for thousands of years, patiently waiting for us to develop the tools and the wisdom necessary to understand what it's trying to tell us. But perhaps the most important lesson it offers isn't encoded in its structure or its alignments. Perhaps it's simply the fact that it exists at all, proof that human beings can create things of lasting significance, things that transcend the limitations of any single lifetime or civilization. In our age of rapid change and disposable technology, that lesson is more relevant than ever. The Sphinx reminds us that we have the capacity to create things that will outlast our current challenges, things that will continue to serve and inspire long after our current concerns have been forgotten. The question is whether we have the vision and the determination to follow their example. Can we think beyond our immediate problems to consider what future generations will need from us? Can we create things designed to function across the kinds of timescales that guided the Sphinx's builders? The ancient monuments sitting in the Egyptian desert suggest that we can. It stands as proof that human ingenuity, properly applied, can create things that seem impossible until someone actually does it. It demonstrates that our ancestors, working with tools and techniques we still don't fully understand, managed to achieve something that continues to challenge our understanding thousands of years later. Their success offers hope that we might be capable of similar achievements. But it also reminds us that such achievements require more than just technical capability. They require vision that extends beyond our own lifetimes, commitment that transcends immediate concerns, and the kind of deep wisdom that recognizes our responsibility to all the generations that will come after us. The Sphinx has been teaching us these lessons for millennia. The question is whether we're finally ready to listen. But what makes this discovery even more extraordinary is what it reveals about the nature of evidence itself. Because we're not just dealing with one anomalous finding that can be easily dismissed. We're looking at multiple independent lines of evidence all converging on the same startling conclusion, evidence that comes from completely different scientific disciplines, analysed by researchers who had no contact with each other, yet all pointing toward the same revolutionary timeline. Think about what this means. When a geologist examines weathering patterns and concludes the Sphinx shows signs of thousands of years of rainfall erosion, that's one data point. When an astronomer calculates stellar positions and finds perfect alignments with constellations from over 10,000 years ago, that's another completely independent data point. When an engineer analyzes construction techniques and finds methods that don't match the supposed historical period, that's a third independent confirmation. Each of these researchers approach the Sphinx from their own specialized perspective, using tools and methods specific to their field. None of them set out to prove a particular theory about the monument's age. They were simply applying their expertise to analyze the evidence in front of them. Yet somehow, despite approaching the problem from completely different angles, they all arrived at conclusions that challenged the conventional timeline. This convergence of evidence from multiple disciplines is what makes the case for an older Sphinx so compelling. It's not based on a single controversial interpretation or a questionable dating method. It's based on a pattern of anomalies that appears no matter which analytical approach you use. But here's what makes this even more fascinating. The resistance to these findings isn't coming from the evidence itself. It's coming from the institutional framework that has grown up around interpreting that evidence. The same academic structures that should be facilitating scientific discovery are instead acting as barriers to accepting what the data is clearly showing. Dr. Robert Schoch experienced this firsthand when he first presented his geological analysis. Instead of engaging with his findings on their scientific merits, the archaeological establishment attacked his credentials, questioned his right to study Egyptian monuments, and dismissed his conclusions without conducting their own independent geological analysis. This response reveals something troubling about how academic disciplines protect their territory. Rather than welcoming expertise from other fields, rather than embracing the interdisciplinary approach that has revolutionized other areas of science, archaeology often retreats into defensive isolation when confronted with evidence that challenges established theories. But the evidence doesn't respect disciplinary boundaries. Geological processes don't care about archaeological timelines. Astronomical phenomena don't adjust themselves to match historical theories. The physical world operates according to its own laws, regardless of what human institutions might prefer those laws to be. And increasingly, technology is making it impossible to ignore what that physical evidence is telling us. High-resolution satellite imagery can reveal construction details that were invisible to earlier generations of researchers. Ground-penetrating radar can map underground structures without disturbing a single stone. Computer modeling can recreate ancient skies with perfect accuracy, allowing us to test astronomical theories with unprecedented precision. These technological advances are democratizing archaeological research in ways that make traditional gatekeeping increasingly ineffective. Independent researchers around the world can now analyze satellite data, access sophisticated analytical software, and collaborate on projects without needing approval from established institutions. Dr. Carmen Bolter's satellite-based research is a perfect example of this trend. Working from her office in Canada, she's been able to identify and analyze anomalous sites across Egypt using publicly available imagery and computational tools. Her findings don't depend on permission from local authorities or cooperation from established archaeological institutions. The evidence is there in the data for anyone with the skills to analyze it. This technological democratization is creating a new dynamic in archaeological research. For the first time in history, the tools necessary to conduct sophisticated analysis of ancient sites are available to researchers outside the traditional academic hierarchy. This is breaking down the monopoly that established institutions have long held over the interpretation of the past. But it's also creating new challenges. With more people able to conduct their own analysis, there's inevitably more disagreement about what the evidence means. Not all interpretations are equally valid, and distinguishing between legitimate research and speculative theorizing becomes increasingly important. This is where the convergence of evidence becomes crucial. When multiple independent researchers using different methodologies all arrive at similar conclusions, it suggests those conclusions are based on genuine patterns in the data rather than wishful thinking or confirmation bias. The case for an older sphinx meets this standard. The geological evidence, the astronomical alignments, the construction anomalies, the global context of similar monuments, all of these independent lines of evidence point toward the same conclusion. This isn't a case of researchers cherry-picking data to support a predetermined theory. It's a case of multiple types of evidence all telling the same story. But accepting this story requires more than just acknowledging the evidence. It requires fundamentally rethinking our assumptions about human development and capability. Because if the Sphinx really is over 10,000 years old, it means that sophisticated construction techniques, advanced astronomical knowledge, and large-scale organizational capability existed during periods when we assumed they were impossible. This challenges one of the most fundamental narratives of human progress, the idea that we've been steadily advancing from primitive beginnings to our current level of sophistication. Instead, it suggests that human development might be more cyclical, with periods of advancement followed by decline, with knowledge being lost and rediscovered across vast spans of time. Recent discoveries at sites around the world are supporting this more complex view of human development. The massive stone circles at Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, dating to over 11,000 years ago, show evidence of sophisticated planning, advanced carving techniques, and complex astronomical alignments. The precision stonework at sites like Pumapunku in Bolivia demonstrates engineering capabilities that challenge our understanding of ancient technology. The acoustic properties of underground chambers in Malta suggest advanced understanding of sound and architecture. Each of these sites, like the Sphinx, shows evidence of capabilities that don't fit the conventional timeline of human development. And increasingly, these sites are being connected by researchers who are recognizing patterns that span continents and millennia. Dr. Andrew Collins has spent decades documenting these connections, showing how similar construction techniques, astronomical knowledge, and symbolic systems appear at widely separated sites during roughly the same time periods. His work suggests that we're not looking at isolated anomalies, but at evidence of a global phenomenon, a period of human development that was far more sophisticated than we've been willing to acknowledge. This global perspective is crucial for understanding what the Sphinx represents. It's not just an isolated Egyptian monument that happens to be older than expected. It's part of a worldwide pattern of advanced construction projects that all date to the same general period, the end of the last ice age and the beginning of the current interglacial period. This timing isn't coincidental. The end of the ice age was a period of dramatic global change, with rising sea levels, shifting climate patterns, and massive population movements. It was also a period when human societies were freed from the constraints of ice age survival and could begin developing more complex technologies and social structures. But this development wasn't uniform or continuous. The Younger Dryas period, from about 12,900 to 11,700 years ago, saw a temporary return to ice age conditions that would have disrupted human societies across the globe. The recovery from this climate crisis coincides almost exactly with the appearance of sophisticated monuments like Göbekli Tepe and, if the evidence is correct, the Sphinx. This pattern suggests that the period following the Younger Dryas was one of rapid human development, driven perhaps by the need to preserve knowledge and techniques that had been threatened by climate catastrophe. The monuments built during this period weren't just religious or ceremonial structures. They were repositories of knowledge designed to survive future catastrophes and preserve crucial information for later generations. The Sphinx, in this context, becomes more than just an ancient monument. It becomes a message from our ancestors, a deliberate attempt to communicate across vast spans of time using the most durable medium available to them: carved stone aligned with eternal celestial movements. But decoding this message requires more than just advanced analytical techniques. It requires a fundamental shift in how we think about our relationship with the past. Instead of viewing ancient monuments as primitive artifacts to be catalogued and explained away, we need to approach them as sophisticated creations that might still have important things to teach us. This shift in perspective is already beginning to happen. Researchers like Graham Hancock, Robert Bauval, and John Anthony West have spent decades advocating for a more respectful and open-minded approach to studying ancient achievements. Their work has helped create space for the kind of interdisciplinary research that's now revealing the Sphinx's secrets. But this research is also revealing something else, something that might be even more important than the specific age of any particular monument. It's revealing that human beings are capable of achievements that transcend the normal limitations of individual lifetimes and civilizations. The builders of the Sphinx, whoever they were and whenever they lived, succeeded in creating something that has continued to function as intended across thousands of years of human history. This achievement represents one of the highest expressions of human potential. It demonstrates our species' unique ability to think beyond immediate concerns, to plan for future generations we'll never meet, to encode our understanding of the world in forms that can survive whatever changes are coming. In our current age of rapid technological change and short-term thinking, this lesson is more relevant than ever. We're making decisions today about artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, nuclear technology, and climate intervention that will affect human societies for centuries or millennia to come. Yet most of these decisions are being made with relatively short-term considerations in mind. The Sphinx reminds us that human beings are capable of much longer-term thinking when the situation demands it. Its builders managed to coordinate efforts across multiple generations, to maintain focus on goals that extended far beyond any individual lifetime, to create something designed to benefit civilizations they would never see. Their success offers both inspiration and guidance for addressing our own long-term challenges. It shows that the kind of deep-time thinking necessary for dealing with problems like climate change and technological disruption is not only possible but has been demonstrated before in human history. But it also shows us that such thinking requires more than just individual vision. It requires institutional frameworks capable of maintaining continuity across generations, knowledge preservation systems that can survive social upheaval, and cultural values that prioritize long-term benefits over immediate gains. The builders of the Sphinx somehow managed to create all of these things. They developed methods for preserving knowledge across vast spans of time, for maintaining project continuity across multiple generations, for encoding information in forms that would remain accessible even after their own civilization had vanished. Understanding how they accomplished this might be crucial for our own survival as a species, because the challenges we're facing today, climate change, resource depletion, technological disruption, operate on timescales that extend far beyond normal human planning horizons. Addressing these challenges successfully will require exactly the kind of long-term thinking and institutional continuity that the Sphinx represents. But first, we need to acknowledge that such achievements are possible. We need to abandon the comfortable assumption that our ancestors were necessarily less capable than we are, that human progress has been a simple linear advancement from primitive to sophisticated. The evidence of the Sphinx suggests a much more complex reality. It suggests that human ingenuity and determination can create things that seem impossible until someone actually does it. It demonstrates that our species has achieved remarkable things before, during periods when such achievements supposedly weren't possible. This realization should be both humbling and empowering. Humbling because it reminds us that we're not the first humans to face seemingly insurmountable challenges. Empowering because it shows us that previous generations found ways to overcome those challenges and preserve their achievements for us to discover. The Sphinx has been waiting in the desert for thousands of years, patiently guarding its secrets while slowly revealing them to each generation that approaches with the right combination of technology, curiosity, and respect. We're finally reaching the point where we have the tools necessary to understand what it's trying to tell us. But understanding the message is only the beginning. The real challenge is applying the lessons it offers to our own situation, using the wisdom encoded in ancient stone to address the problems of the modern world. The builders of the Sphinx succeeded in creating something that has outlasted empires, climate changes, and countless cycles of human rise and decline. Their achievement stands as proof that human creativity, properly applied, can create things of truly lasting significance. Now the question is whether we can follow their example. Can we create things designed to benefit not just ourselves but all the generations that will come after us? Can we think and plan on the kinds of timescales that guided the Sphinx's builders? The ancient monument sitting in the Egyptian desert suggests that we can. But it also reminds us that such achievements require more than just good intentions. They require the kind of deep wisdom, long-term commitment, and institutional continuity that allowed our ancestors to succeed in preserving their most important insights across thousands of years of human history. The Sphinx has been teaching us these lessons for millennia. The question is whether we're finally ready to listen and learn from what it has to tell us. Because if we are, if we can develop the same kind of deep time perspective that guided its builders, then perhaps we too can create things that will continue to serve and inspire long after our current concerns have been forgotten. The evidence is mounting. The questions are multiplying. And slowly, carefully, the Sphinx is beginning to reveal its secrets. What we do with those revelations, how we apply the lessons they offer to our own challenges and opportunities, may determine whether our own civilization creates monuments that future generations will still be studying and wondering about thousands of years from now. Human history might be far older, far more complex, and far more inspiring than we ever dared to imagine. The Sphinx has been trying to tell us this for thousands of years. Maybe it's finally time we started believing it. And so here we stand, at the threshold of a revelation that could redefine everything we thought we knew about our own species. The evidence is no longer scattered fragments that can be dismissed individually. It's a convergence of geological facts, astronomical precision, construction anomalies, and global patterns that all point toward one inescapable conclusion. The Sphinx is far older than we've been taught to believe. But accepting this conclusion means accepting something even more profound. It means acknowledging that human civilization itself might be far older, far more sophisticated, and far more mysterious than our textbooks dare to suggest. It means recognizing that the neat progression from primitive to advanced that we've built our understanding upon might be a dangerous oversimplification of a much more complex reality. The weathered limestone tells a story of thousands of years of rainfall that shouldn't exist according to the official timeline. The astronomical alignments encode mathematical knowledge that supposedly wasn't developed until millennia later. The construction techniques demonstrate capabilities that don't match any known ancient Egyptian methods. The global context reveals similar anomalies at sites around the world, all dating to the same impossible period. This isn't speculation anymore. This isn't wishful thinking or fringe theorizing. This is evidence, mounting and undeniable, that our understanding of human history has been fundamentally incomplete. Dr. Robert Schoch risked his career to present the geological facts. Independent researchers around the world have confirmed his findings using different methodologies. Advanced satellite imagery has revealed hidden chambers that remain unexplored. Computer modeling has verified astronomical alignments that span thousands of years. Each new technology, each new analytical approach only strengthens the case for a much older origin. Yet the resistance continues. Not because the evidence is weak, but because the implications are too vast to easily accept. Because acknowledging that the Sphinx might be over 10,000 years old means acknowledging that everything we've been taught about the development of human civilization needs to be reconsidered. It means accepting that our ancestors were capable of achievements that we've barely managed to equal with modern technology. It means recognizing that sophisticated knowledge, advanced astronomy, precise mathematics, large-scale engineering, existed during periods when humans were supposedly still living in simple hunter-gatherer societies. But perhaps most challenging of all, it means admitting that we might not represent the pinnacle of human achievement that we've assumed ourselves to be. It means acknowledging that knowledge can be lost, that civilizations can fall, that the path of human development is far more complex and cyclical than our linear models suggest. The builders of the Sphinx, whoever they were, managed to create something that has survived climate changes, conquests, neglect, and countless attempts to unlock its secrets. They encoded information in forms designed to remain accessible across vast spans of time. They demonstrated capabilities that continue to challenge our understanding thousands of years later. Their achievement stands as proof that human ingenuity, properly applied, can transcend the limitations of any single civilization. It shows that our species is capable of thinking and planning across geological timescales when the stakes are high enough and the vision is clear enough. In our age of rapid change and short-term thinking, this lesson couldn't be more relevant. We're facing challenges, climate change, technological disruption, resource depletion, that will affect human societies for centuries or millennia to come. Yet most of our solutions are optimized for immediate results rather than long-term sustainability. The Sphinx reminds us that human beings are capable of much more. Its builders created something designed to function across time spans that encompass the entire recorded history of human civilization. They succeeded in preserving crucial knowledge through periods of catastrophic change, encoding it in forms that would remain meaningful even after their own culture had vanished. But they did more than just preserve information. They created a challenge for future generations. The Sphinx only yields its secrets to civilizations that have developed sufficient analytical sophistication to decode its messages. It's a test of human intellectual development, a monument that reveals more of itself as our understanding advances. We might finally be reaching the level of sophistication its builders intended. Our satellites can map hidden chambers. Our computers can calculate ancient astronomical alignments. Our geological instruments can analyze weathering patterns with unprecedented precision. We have the tools necessary to read what the monument is trying to tell us. But do we have the wisdom to understand its deeper message? Do we have the humility to accept that our ancestors might have been far more capable than we've assumed? Do we have the vision to apply their lessons to our own challenges? The evidence suggests that we're standing at a crossroads. We can continue to cling to comfortable assumptions about human progress, dismissing inconvenient evidence in favor of established narratives. Or we can embrace the more complex, more inspiring, more challenging view of human history that the Sphinx is revealing. If we choose the latter path, if we're willing to follow the evidence wherever it leads, we might discover that human civilization is far older and far more remarkable than we ever dared to imagine. We might learn that our species has overcome seemingly impossible challenges before, during periods when such achievements supposedly weren't possible. And we might find inspiration for addressing our own seemingly impossible challenges. Because if the builders of the Sphinx could create something that has functioned as intended across thousands of years of human history, if they could preserve crucial knowledge through periods of civilizational collapse, if they could think and plan across geological timescales, then perhaps we can too. The Sphinx has been waiting in the desert for millennia, patiently guarding its secrets while slowly revealing them to each generation that approaches with the right questions. It has survived empires and climate changes, conquest and neglect, always holding something back, always keeping us guessing. But now, finally, we might be ready to hear what it's really trying to tell us. Not just information about ancient astronomy or construction techniques, but a message about human potential itself. A demonstration that our species is capable of achievements that transcend individual lifetimes, that outlast civilizations, that continue to inspire and challenge across vast spans of time. The question is, what will we do with this knowledge? How will we apply the lessons encoded in ancient stone to the challenges of the modern world? Can we develop the same kind of deep-time perspective that guided the Sphinx's builders? Can we create things designed to benefit not just ourselves, but all the generations that will come after us? The ancient monument has been asking us these questions for thousands of years. The weathered limestone, the precise alignments, the mysterious chambers, the global context, all of it pointing toward the same profound truth: that human beings are capable of far more than we usually give ourselves credit for. But recognizing this potential is only the beginning. The real challenge is living up to it. The real test is whether we can follow the example set by the Sphinx's builders, creating things of lasting significance in a world of constant change. They succeeded in preserving their most important insights across thousands of years of human history. They created a monument that continues to function as intended, despite dramatic changes in human society and understanding. They demonstrated that it's possible to think beyond immediate concerns, to plan for future generations we'll never meet, to encode wisdom in forms that can survive whatever changes are coming. Their achievement stands as one of the highest expressions of human potential. It proves that our species can create things that seem impossible until someone actually does it. It shows that the limitations we usually accept, the constraints of individual lifetimes, the boundaries of single civilizations, the challenges of preserving knowledge across vast spans of time, can all be overcome when human creativity is properly focused. The Sphinx embodies this triumph over limitation. It represents our ancestors' refusal to accept that their insights would die with them, their determination to preserve what mattered most for all the generations that would come after. It stands as proof that human vision, properly applied, can literally reshape the landscape and continue to influence human thought across millennia. As we stand before this ancient monument, whether in person or in imagination, we're not just looking at a relic of the past. We're looking at a mirror that reflects our own potential for creating things of lasting significance. We're seeing proof that the challenges we face today, no matter how daunting they might seem, are not beyond human capability to address. The builders of the Sphinx faced their own seemingly impossible challenges. They lived through dramatic climate change, massive population movements, the collapse of established social systems. Yet they found a way not just to survive these challenges, but to create something that would continue to serve and inspire long after their immediate concerns had been forgotten. Their success offers hope for our own future. It suggests that human ingenuity, determination, and long-term thinking can overcome any obstacle when properly applied. It demonstrates that our species is capable of achievements that transcend the normal limitations of time and circumstance. But it also reminds us that such achievements don't happen automatically. They require vision that extends beyond immediate concerns, commitment that transcends individual lifetimes, and wisdom that recognizes our responsibility to all the generations that will come after us. The Sphinx has been teaching us these lessons for thousands of years. It has shown us what becomes possible when human creativity is focused on creating something truly permanent in a world of constant change. It has demonstrated that our ancestors were capable of thinking and planning across timescales that encompass the entire span of recorded history. Now the question is whether we can follow their example, whether we can develop the same kind of deep time perspective that guided their work, whether we can create things designed to function not just for years or decades, but for centuries or millennia. The evidence suggests that we can. The same species that created the Sphinx still exists. The same human capabilities that made such achievements possible are still present in our DNA, still available for us to access and apply. The only question is whether we have the vision and the determination to use them. The Sphinx stands there in the desert, weathered but enduring, still keeping some of its secrets while slowly revealing others. It has been our teacher for thousands of years, patiently waiting for us to develop the sophistication necessary to understand its deepest lessons. We might finally be ready. We have the technology to analyze its construction, the mathematical tools to decode its alignments, the geological knowledge to read its weathered surfaces. We have access to global patterns of evidence that no previous generation possessed. But most importantly, we're beginning to develop the humility necessary to recognize that our ancestors might have been far more capable than we've assumed. We're starting to understand that human history is far more complex, far more ancient, and far more inspiring than we've been taught to believe. The Sphinx has been trying to tell us this for millennia. It has been standing there in the desert, a monument to human potential, a challenge to never stop asking questions about who we are and what we're capable of achieving. The weathered stone has weathered everything the world could throw at it. The precise alignments continue to track celestial movements with mathematical perfection. The hidden chambers still guard their secrets, waiting for the right moment to reveal them. And through it all, the monument continues to ask us the same fundamental question that has driven human achievement throughout history. What will you create that will outlast your own time? What legacy will you leave for the generations that come after you? What monument to human potential will you build that future civilizations will still be studying, still be wondering about, still be learning from thousands of years from now? The builders of the Sphinx answered that question with carved stone and astronomical precision. They created something that has continued to challenge and inspire across vast spans of time. They proved that human beings, working with dedication and vision, can create things that transcend the limitations of any single lifetime or civilization. Their achievement stands as both inspiration and challenge for our own generation. It shows us what becomes possible when human creativity is focused on creating something truly lasting. It demonstrates that our species is capable of far more than we usually dare to attempt. The question now is whether we're ready to accept that challenge, whether we're prepared to think beyond our immediate concerns and create things designed to benefit all the generations that will come after us, whether we have the vision and the determination to follow the example set by the ancient builders who looked up at the stars, down at the stone, and forward across thousands of years of human history. The Sphinx has been waiting for us to answer that question for millennia. The evidence of its true age, the proof of its builders' capabilities, the demonstration of what human beings can achieve when they think in terms of geological timescales. All of it has been preserved in weathered stone, waiting for us to develop the sophistication necessary to understand it. We might finally be ready to hear what our ancestors were trying to tell us. The question is, what will we do with their message? How will we honor their achievement? What will we create that future generations will still be studying, still be wondering about, still be learning from, when our own civilization has become ancient history? The Sphinx stands there in the desert, eternal and enigmatic, still keeping its deepest secrets, while slowly revealing the profound truth it has been guarding for thousands of years. That human beings are capable of achievements that seem impossible until someone actually does them. That our species can create things that outlast empires, survive climate changes, and continue to inspire wonder across vast spans of time. The ancient builders succeeded in creating such a monument. The question for us is whether we can follow their example, whether we can create our own monuments to human potential that will continue to challenge and inspire long after we're gone. The Sphinx has been asking us that question for thousands of years. Maybe it's finally time we started taking it seriously.